This is episode number 22, featuring master artist Quang Ho. Welcome to the PleinAir Podcast from PleinAir Magazine. I'm your host, Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we dive into the world of outdoor painting, often called plein air painting. For those of you who don't know, plein air is a French term that essentially means outdoors or the open air. The French pronounce it plein air, others pronounce it plein air, but no matter what you pronounce it like, it is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. The new golf, as I like to call it, and this show is all about that movement, the painters, the collectors, the galleries, and the art. This week's podcast is brought to you by Lilidol Video Productions, which just released 2 new art instruction videos from Chinese master Zhou Wang. It's a drawing video and a painting video, and his workshops are pretty hard to get into and are typically sold out. So this is a rare opportunity to see the master at work and learn his loose and amazing style. He painted my portrait at the PleinAir Convention. It was pretty incredible. You can see it in the current issue of Fine Art Connoisseur. You can visit Lilidol at lilyartvideo.com. Strange name, Lilidol, but Lily, L-I-L-I, artvideo.com. It is my desire to see more people fall in love with plein air painting, and you can help by sharing this podcast with your friends on social or email. And I hope you'll subscribe so it comes to you every week. Just hit the subscribe button on your player. And of course, we would love for you to go to iTunes and leave a comment. And if you have feedback or interview ideas, reach me, Eric, at pleinairmagazine.com. Today's interview is brought to you by Fall Color Week Publishers Invitational, which is a painting retreat coming up this October in Maine. Let's get right to our interview with Quang Ho. Well, we have Quang Ho on the line today. Hey, Quang.
Hi, Eric. It's great to hear from you.
It's great to talk to you. It's been a while.
Yes.
You've been out there busily doing what? What's been going on the last few months?
Oh my gosh, so much going on right now. I'm actually in a very interesting experimental stage with my paintings. So I'm taking a lot of time on them. Large paintings, 6 feet by 8 feet, very new to me. And but you know the regular deadline schedules and workshops and travels and all of that, it's taken up a lot of time. So lots of things to juggle, but it's all exciting.
Yeah, so tell me what kind of experimentation you're doing.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I was in West Virginia last fall for a particular show, and I've never been to West Virginia in the fall, and I was blown away by how beautiful it was. And this is kind of consistent with what we're talking about as far as painting plein air. I actually took my paints out there, and I went into the woods and all that incredible layers of colors, and I was going to set up and paint. And just as I was about to do that, because I was really struck by how beautiful it was, I realized that if I just set up and did a quick painting, I would be missing what this really was meaning to me, Eric. So I literally put my paints away, and I walked around in the woods, like deep into the woods, like a crazy man. Nobody knew who I was. This is really way out there. And for 2 days, I just sat there and absorbed it. I mean, literally just see the layers of color. Like, there are like 6-8 inches layers of leaves that goodness knows how long have been there. And the subtle colors of grays and browns and brilliant yellows and oranges that I've never seen before. And after 2 days, I saw huge paintings from them, not just little sketches on location. So that's what I'm doing, is reliving that whole layering experience of all these colors that I never would have seen had I not just put the stuff away and looked at it.
So you just stopped.
Yes, and observed.
You know, it's interesting because I used to be a photographer, and it was kind of like that Chevy Chase movie Vacation. You'd get to a spot, you'd take a picture, and you'd leave. And I always thought that plein air painting was, you know, that opportunity to slow down. It's almost like, you know, stopping someplace and having a picnic and just enjoying it. But you took it to the next level. You didn't paint at all. That's right. I painted plein air all my life, of course, and it's
it's great. You need to do that to get connected with the colors you're seeing, being in the place, smelling it, feeling it, all of that. But for me, painting is another step deeper than that now, and it's almost like my entire 30-something years of learning to paint is to get to this stage where I can get much deeper with it, and it's all that practice, all of that like practicing your scales is to get to here, so I can really compose something that I can sink my teeth into. You know.
So how big are these paintings?
Well, they're huge. I'm literally tacking 6 feet by 8 feet canvases all over my new studio that I just built, and I just staple them onto the wall, and I'm just running from one canvas to another.
Simultaneously?
You know. Once I have them all blocked in, I don't mind going from one place to another just to let them, just let them speak to me while I'm working on this one. I glance over at the other one, and it says something where, I just see a little spot that I can put in. So that's the beauty of it now, is I want to do these paintings as if I really don't have to sell them. I want to give them as much attention as they want to or need to, and just experience them that way. And I know they'll be my best paintings I've ever painted.
So you've never done giant paintings like that before?
No.
And what are you learning about yourself, and what are you learning about painting that has to be done differently in that kind of an environment?
That almost the end product is not the point. It's really, it's at this point, I don't have any more questions about painting. I can pretty much look at any painting, whether it's abstract or realism, and dissect it and basically explain it. And so for me, it's really my own being there in the moment to put the color notes down, the value notes down, the paint down, and then respond to it. And then having this interaction with it, the idea of composition, what if the composition works or the colors are working, or all of that comes into play. But part of it is it's performance. It's like you practice this Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, on the piano, and you practice it, and then you get on stage, and then you're supposed to forget yourself and let it go and go with the thing. And I think that's a little bit like, that's what I'm hoping to find is, and I've already found, I've done 3 or 4 of them, and each one is a different experience entirely. For example, one of them, I was really trying to relive the colors that I saw. But I wanted to paint it really spontaneously and let it flow, and I realized I couldn't do it because I didn't know the colors well enough. So I slowed down and took one piece of color at a time and put it on. And then after a week or so of that, I went to the same woods, and I took all the colors out, and I did a black and white painting of it. And the paint just flew out of me. I mean, it just flowed the way that I wanted the color painting to flow, but it didn't. So you see what I mean? So I did it in black and white, because by taking color out of the equation, I could express it the way that I wanted to. And now, hopefully, I'll take that experience, put color back into it, and see if it works. So I'm like a little...
So you did a value study, and which helped you get the scene down, and then you're going to go back in and do another and put the color in. Are you said this was in West Virginia. Are you working from studies that you did there on location? Or are you going back there? What are you doing?
Oh, no, I don't really need, I take a lot of photographs, I do sketches, but those are all just note-taking. So, they're just to remind me of what it was like.
Right.
So essentially, yeah, I use both. The photograph, or the iPhone really, it's so convenient just to snap a shot and just remind you what just the angles were, what the proportions were. But I don't trust any of it for color, of course. And not even value, but just for drawing, essentially.
Right.
That's why PleinAir painting is so valuable, because you're there to take notes on color and value and texture.
So for the people who might be listening to this and might not know much about you, obviously you're very well known in the circles that you run in, and very well known by the collectors. But tell those people how you would describe what you do.
What I do, Well, a real brief history then. I graduated from art school in 1985, and I went to the Colorado Institute of Art, and it was a commercial art school, and I ran into this mentor. His name was Rennie Bruin, and very little known person, but brilliant thinker in ways of art. And he gave me the basic vocabulary that I was able to take and carry on. And I had my very first one-man show as a sophomore in high school at a gallery in Denver, a little gallery called Tomorrow's Masters Gallery. And most of my work was about, 125 was the most expensive one. But and then I had my very first oil painting show. I didn't start oil painting until I was about maybe 19 or 20. And I had my very first solo show at Saks Gallery in Cherry Creek in Denver here in 1991, and first time, and it sold out. And then we had a few shows after that. And at that point, I was a pretty successful illustrator in the U.S. I had a good rep and out of Chicago. And then I just completely phased away because my real passion is painting. And I kind of stepped away from illustration altogether and just transitioned to it's been a really successful painting career, way beyond my expectations, certainly. And I've had 2 solo shows in London. I've had shows in Taos, Denver, Vail, Houston has been a really great place for me to show over the years, and just made. And I teach. The what Rennie passed on to me and what I've built on it, I've been able to teach workshops, and that's been a real joy to be able to share that. It's such a privilege to be able to share that. And but as far as what I do with painting, it's I don't particularly have any subject matter that interests me singularly. I love everything. Just like this West Virginia woods, I never would have expected that. But it was just whatever moves me. I just try to be open to it, and then just solve it in terms of visual problems. But that's a whole different set of discussion that we'll get into, I'm sure. But as far as what I do, I paint landscapes, figures, and I did a whole series with Cairo Ballet for a long time. I did just whatever visually intrigues me and brings me to the easel. And then once I'm in front of the easel, it becomes a whole set of different problems than just the subject matter, as you know.
Right.
It becomes, what do you do with color? What do you do with values? What do you do with texture? And that's the joy to me. The subject matter is just the starting point.
So why don't we back way up? You've got a fascinating story. I'm sure you've told it 1,000 times, and you're probably bored with mentioning it, but I think there are a lot of people who have not heard your story. Why don't you give us the backstory before you went to art school and how you even got over here?
Oh, my gosh. Well, Eric, I'm actually been trying to write a book for the last 4 years, and I'm a slow writer. But I'm trying to tell that story. But yes, basically, I left Vietnam one day before Saigon fell at the age of 11, came to America when I was 12. And, right at the Tet Offensive was in 1967 was when my dad was captured and taken away, and I was 4 years old. So my mom was single with 6 kids, and then she got married about 3 years later when she thought, my dad would probably have passed away, had 4 more kids. And she, the single mom, brought 8 little kids over here because two are still left in Vietnam. But anyway, she brought us over here on her own, not knowing the language. None of us did.
How did that happen? How did she even get out? And what was it like, if you can remember, what it must have been like when you were trying to get out of there? It must have been a pretty crazy time.
Oh, my gosh. Totally intense. She was married. She remarried to a Korean businessman. So my 4 youngest brothers and sisters are half brothers and sisters. Of course, they're not half the full, but we left with the Korean embassy the night before Saigon fell because we were all packed on these 2 huge battleships, all the Korean immigrants and. So we left. We went to Korea for about 3 months. We were there in basically a refugee camp over there. And then she found out she had a cousin here in the United States. And so one day the American embassy came into that camp, that school where we were staying in Korea, and asked if we have relatives over here. And she raised her hands. Here's this woman who's basically a country girl, uneducated for the most part, had survivor instinct like you wouldn't believe. So she raised her hands, and next thing you know, here we are, and I don't know who my cousin is. So I don't know how she did it, but here I am anyway. And the beautiful thing is, when we came here, we landed in Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. So that's where they shipped all the immigrants, Vietnamese immigrants, who came into this country at that time, at this Fort Smith, Arkansas, actually. And we were all packed into this army barracks, divided into cubicles, and each family had a cubicle. And we stayed there until one by one the families were sponsored out into the States, usually by churches. And in our case, we were sponsored to Denver by the First Reformed Church, and specifically by a couple that are, to me, are like my parents, really. They're angels. They're 6'3" Dutch people, Harold and Sib van Lozenord. They're like my parents, and their extended family is just my family too. But the beautiful thing is Harold has never made more than $30,000 a year in his life. When we first met, had 3 beautiful daughters, took on a single mom and 8 kids. And knowing Harold the way I do now, I just can't believe he did that. But he was our guardian angel. He and Sib were, and all the people around. So I've really met with nothing but the greatest of kindness in this country. And wherever I go, whoever I meet, and I'm just eternally grateful for that. And it's wonderful, So now for me to be in the position to share what I know about painting and whatever else I could share, it's quite an amazing thing.
So you've had quite a journey. You, in terms of painting, even after that journey, what do you think were the key things that really were the defining moments that really defined how your career became a success? Were there defining moments?
Eric, I've never thought about my career. Isn't that strange? I've always just, growing up with it's a little divergent, but I'll come back to it. But I never thought about career because when I first came over here, I didn't have any money. So as a little boy, I would, mow the lawn or cut grass for just a few dollars. And every single dollar I saved up because it was like, oh my God, I can't believe I have a few dollars, So I was really frugal and always saved. And now, even though I make a whole lot more, it doesn't feel any different. I feel like I have about the same amount of money. And so for me, career wasn't the point. Getting to paint was the point, Getting to paint and actually making a little bit of money off of it was just amazing to me. So I can't tell you what shaped my career. I can tell you what shaped my painting and my realizations about painting. That I can name. Just for example, when I had my first solo show with Saks Gallery, I didn't go approaching him. Michael came to me because when I was doing illustration, I would stop whenever I have a moment and do a painting, whether it's a still life or something, have somebody sit for me. And these paintings I did for myself, and I would just put it aside against my wall. Well, one day there was a collective show at the Art Students League of Denver, which had opened recently, back 20-something years ago. And they asked me, if I can, do you want to show something? Because I had started teaching there, and I said, oh, sure, I have a few paintings sitting around. And the response to them, and they were all not for sale. That's the funny thing. And the response to them was really positive. And Michael came to me, I remember at one point, he said, he has this way of asking without asking. He's it's pretty good if you ever want to, show him, come by. So he kind of halfway asked me. And I came to him and said, I don't want to just show a piece or two. He said, well, let's do a show then. And so, great, I've never had a show. So I just focused and did like 30 paintings. over however long it was. And we had a show, and it sold out. I didn't know what to expect, and it was so exciting. Of course, that was a thrill beyond thrill for me. And then at that point, I painted more and more and more until I and then I think Southwest Art did an article on me very early on, and just little things. I'd like to think of it as if you follow your heart. This is so trite, but maybe it's true in my case. But I just follow my heart. I don't think about career. I don't think, which is opposite of what you should do. And that maybe my career would be so much bigger and more blossomed today if I did. I think it probably would. But it's not important to me. I think that just getting to paint is what I love, and I have more than enough. And so, but getting back to what the transformative things that happened to me as a painter, I was always the best kid in class as far as art goes, and always the shining star, and I won all the high school art competitions, that kind of thing. But when I went to the College Institute of Art, which is a 2-year program, I was in a drawing class, and there's this guy named Rennie Bruin, and he was the director of the life drawing department. He came from Hell's Kitchen, New York, started painting at the age of 35, self-taught entirely. He looks like Karl Marx a little bit with that, the big nose and the glasses and the mustache. And he knew who I was. I never had him in class the first year, but he walked into my figure painting class one day, and he looked over my shoulder and he goes, "What the hell are you doing?" And I looked behind. It was Rennie, and I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm just drawing the figure. I'm trying, I don't know. I'm just drawing the figure." And he kind of snickered at me and left. And I spent 3 hours getting the perfect drawing, rendering all the forms, the shades. And after 3 hours, Eric, he came back in and he looked at me and he sniffed again, and he kind of snickered, and he says, "Here," pushed me aside. 5 minutes left. He grabbed my brush. He didn't ask me, "Can I show you something?" He just grabbed it. Here. He destroyed my paintings in 5 minutes. Took all the paint I had out and handed me the brush and left. Didn't say a word. And my jaw was on the ground. I've never seen anything so spectacularly beautiful. And literally, he just destroyed everything I did. He didn't explain what he did, but I knew something really important. It just happened. Was here I was focused on perfect drawing and all that, and here this man came in and made it into a painting, and I don't know what he did. So I could tell you now, because what he did was essentially looked at the whole big picture. I saw the figure. I saw the body as I thought it should look. He saw what the light was doing to it and abstracted the whole thing down to what was the light and what was the shadow. He painted the light, and that's all he needed. And I built the skeleton for him, of course, so he didn't. So he just laid, and he used paint to express that. It was so beautiful. I'll never forget that experience. So I can do that to my students now. I can see a student who I think essentially is about understanding the big picture. And I mean, we can get into that philosophically, but to me, you can't really make a good decision, whether in painting or in life, probably, unless, well, let's just say that the more you see the big picture, the better decisions you can make. So that was a big aha experience. And then from that point on, Rennie introduced to me, he said, all the paintings in the world since the beginning of time can be summed up in 8 different visual approaches. And to this day, Eric, I have not heard that or read that or I've seen anybody talked about that. And Rennie came up with this on his own. I have this in my DVD that I've made, but because it takes a long time. But essentially, you can see it like light and shadow. Light and shadow is only one of 8 of the 8 visual approaches. And before Rembrandt came and painted light and shadow the way that he did, well, he literally, when he painted you, he's not painting you, he's painting what the light does to you and what the shadow does to you. But before that, even Da Vinci didn't really know that. Da Vinci, as brilliant as he was rendering light and shadow without understanding it. Rembrandt turned it into a religion. So now all of the artists I can teach, it's essentially, the effect of shadow and light. I remember asking my high school teacher this like, Mr. Bao, how do you shade something? And he said, well, he didn't know the answer. He said, well, that's just something you'll learn as you go along. I'm like, oh dear. So I didn't know that. I thought that was the right answer. But it was such a mystery. But then I can explain it to you in 5 minutes, and it would change the way you look at everything, you know? So I could do that for students today. But essentially, most students know that now. It's like the 20 years ago, not so many. But now they all do. And because information is being shared at such an amazing rate of speed right now. I love that. I think the next wave of artists, if they're really focused and attentive, they're gonna be so much better than the artists that were in just 30, 40 years ago.
Well, there's so many resources, so much online training, so many ateliers, so many teachers, so much video. There's just a lot of great training materials, and we are producing some amazing artists now.
Absolutely, I love watching it. The other, so light and shadow was one of the visual approaches, but think about Van Gogh or Richard Diebenkorn or Degas even. They were not light and shadow painters, and I didn't know that. So what they are local tone painters. And the Japanese painter, the Japanese art, thinking about Japanese art, here is a whole culture of people who are very intelligent, very sensitive to painting. They never painted in light and shadow. How's that possible? They look at the same world that we do with the same sun that comes up every day, and they don't see shadow and light. They see everything as abstract, simple, beautiful values and colors. That's local tone painting. That's the second visual approach, you see? And then what Jackson Pollock did, that's a whole different thing. That's what I call equalization. And that's equalization is a form of painting where you're doing a painting that has no focal point. So you could do that. Bruegel did that in the 1500s, though, with tons of people running around everywhere. He's being attentive to every single detail, but there was not a singular focal point, per se. It's like a toss-out. It's like a tapestry. And that's a beautiful way to paint. And in a sense, my landscapes that I'm doing right now are more equalization than anything else. So we could go on that, but there's 8 different visual approaches, and all these ideas help to clarify and verbalize, and that helps a lot in my painting, because that gives you painting clearer intention, and I could start a painting, like I can step into the studio and say, I'm going to experiment with equalization, see how far I can go with it. So I start with an intention like that, and next thing you know, a year later, I'm still painting on it, It's really a lot of fun.
So you'll probably touch on those 8 points and the specifics when you do your workshop at the PleinAir Convention, yes?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no, when I teach a workshop, I give it everything I've got. I mean, I give them exactly what I've learned up to now that's most useful to me about painting, and so that's such a big part of it. But also, teaching how I arrived at seeing, and how I arrived at what works in a painting, and the philosophy behind what works in the painting is really interesting to me. It's such a deep realization, and it comes from my search for. I've always had this thirst for searching for. It started with religion and philosophy and spirituality and all that, because I want to find out why. What in the world what the heck is this all about? And so those questions actually indirectly and directly at the same time fed right back into what works in the painting. They correspond so beautifully. So I talk about that if I have the time. So that's why. Yeah, doing we have a 1.5 day workshop at the PleinAir Convention, I believe.
Yep. It starts the day and a half before. Well, I don't want to make this about the workshop. I want to help people who are who are listening to this, who might not be coming. Maybe they will come. But what do you think? You encounter a lot of baby painters that come to your workshops. You encounter them out in the world. What are the biggest mistakes that you see them making when people first learn to paint? And what are some of the things that you can tell them now that would help them overcome those?
Mistakes. Interesting question. I don't I don't think in terms of mistakes, really, Eric, because just as you asked that question, it's not even in my head to think about mistakes. I think the mistakes tend to not happen at the very beginning. They happen more at the mid stage where an artist becomes more competent, you know, and then they start thinking about the career and so on more than I'm being a complete purist, of course, when I say this a little bit. I realize that, but the mistake is in getting stuck into believing that somehow that's more important than what you do with your paintings. You got to remember why you paint to begin with. You know, it's that you're trying to be connected to. You want to. I have people who've quit big jobs to become painters, and then halfway through they said, "Well, how do I start selling these works?" I'm like, oh God, I can't answer that question. But I think the thing that holds back the thing that holds back a painter from becoming a real artist to me is in believing what they think they see instead of really understanding what they see. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but painting is a way of retraining how I thought I saw. It's kind of an unlearning of everything that I thought. For example,
I think what I hear you saying, maybe you can confirm or so on this. I think what I hear you saying is that we, because of what we experience as children, coloring books and so on, we tend to say, okay, a tree is this, it's a lollipop shape, or the sun is, a half circle in the corner of the painting with beams coming out of it. I think some of that stuff, when I'm out painting, sometimes I have to overcome I'm painting a tree and it should be green when the tree I'm looking at isn't green at all.
Right.
So is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. That's it. And it's that we do carry a concept of the world, whether we realize it or not.
Right. And
we color the world with that concept. And that's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily truth at all. You see what I mean?
Right.
So it is imperative that we understand that as quickly as possible if you want to be an artist. And to be so learning to see in the sense that you're relearning to look at what you see. I have a really beautiful, meaningful thing that stays with me to illustrate this, and I talked about this in my video as well. But it's about my first time I read Helen Keller. I found this book called My Religion, and I was curious, how she's such a brilliant person. What did she think about? How does she see the world, in quotes? And so when I read it, it talked about how she was dumb, deaf, and blind to the age of 9 until her teacher spelled the word water and spelled the sign, the word letter in her hand until she got it, until she understood that and the sense of water meant this. But she said that before that, singular experience. She had no thoughts in her head. She could only feel with her skin. She had no other senses, so that if she bumped into a wall, she would yelp, react like an animal, she said, and then walk around and bump to another wall and react to it like that without memory, I don't think. So because there's no words. There's no think about that. To walk around being alive and have no thoughts in your head. So that word water was the first thought in her head. And she said when she felt that, she felt another mind touching her mind, and a light came on in her head. That just completely floored me when I read that, because I'd been doing some meditations, learning about it, and I realized then that she was the awakened one. She had just awoke, but her mind was empty. There was no words. I had chills thinking about that. Well, I drove down the road thinking more and more about that. What it would be like to not have any thoughts about anything and be completely awake. No preconceptions, no preconceptions of what a tree is or a face is. And then 20 years, it didn't occur to me until 20 years later as I was painting, what if she had could have opened her eyes at that point and looked at the world the way that an artist does. Because she has no preconception, she wouldn't even know what far away was, what close-up was. She wouldn't know what a face is. She wouldn't know. She would see anything that are similar in value, black and black, would all be one. Everything would be visually connected. And that's exactly what I've been trying to get to as a painter. You see, that's what all the squinting is all about. When you take workshops and they tell you to squint, but that's real seeing. That is the pure, non-objective, non-subjective, purely objective seeing that unifies everything in the composition. And then to have the understanding to go with it. That to me that's fundamentally how I look at the world. Now, philosophically, I try to think of how Helen Keller would also look at the world, in the sense that she wouldn't have any judgment about anything because she doesn't carry around all the crap that we carry around, you know? So, but that's a whole different subject matter. But that, to me, that sums up painting.
So do you find yourself frustrated when you're painting still? I mean, you said that you've pretty much figured out all the technical stuff long time ago, and now you're more instinctive. But do you still get frustrated when you paint?
I get frustrated at the lack of ability to execute something every now and then, sure. But that's why we practice and we practice and we practice. So if nothing else, yeah, I know. I mean, it's very rare, those moments, those paintings where you know you float like a butterfly. You just flow through, and the painting just paint themselves, and those are rare. But that's what I hope for.
How do you divorce the thoughts of, there's all kinds of stuff that goes through my head when I paint. And I talk to my friends, and they're thinking things like, oh man, this is going to sell, and this is going to be a big one, or I'm going to get famous, or I'm going to win an award, or wow, look at how I did that. I mean, how do you divorce that thought and just stay with the instinct? Because the paintings that are instinct only seem to be the best.
Well, yes, you have to divorce yourself from the eye that's asking all those questions. Is what you do. It's who's asking those silly questions. You know, we never stop to think about that. But who's being anxious about whether this painting is going to sell or not? And that's where all those years of wandering in the dark and wandering in the wilderness and asking these questions spiritually and so on has helped me, because I don't pay attention to that noise anymore. It's non-essential, you know. So that's really the short answer to that. Is I know they're there, and it creeps up like I read this somewhere. It's like it creeps up on you like a bad roommate.
You want to tell us stories about bad roommates?
Thankfully, I've never had to live with a roommate. Amazingly enough, yeah.
So if you had a child, and that child expressed interest in learning painting, or you were sitting down with someone who was going to approach it from the very beginning, and they had not yet developed any preconceived notions, what's the advice that you would give to that person?
Yes, that's an easy one for me. Drawing. Okay, so it's simply don't even worry about color in the beginning. I mean, actually, going back to your initial question about the mistakes, I see this a lot. The mistake of a lot of beginning artists is they think they can't get the color right, but it's actually not the color. It's usually drawing and values. So in that sense, I would say I can't even begin to teach you about painting until you can exercise some ability to draw, you know? And that's, you know, if you look at Andrew Wyeth, his father, the great illustrator N.C. Wyeth, didn't teach his son. He had him draw in his studio, but he sent him off somewhere else to learn how to paint. But he was asked one time by some art writer, said, "Aren't you afraid that Andrew it's going to be too academic? That he's learning all this academic drawing, is it going to kill his creativity?" His answer was so awesomely profound. I love it. He said, "Well, if it's going to be killed, it ought to be killed." So, like, yes, that's great. And that's the way it should be. If you have no creativity or no sense of life in your own self anyway, then all you're just going to do is do some beautiful renderings, and that's perfectly fine. But you can't be the poet and the great artist that that is possibly there without the ability to draw. So I would say learn to draw, understand what the academies are trying to teach you, but that's just the starting point. It's like playing the scales. If I wanted to play piano, I know that that's the only thing stopping me right now is I'd love to play the piano, but I can't do it because I haven't practiced the scales at all. So so there's no point in talking about it.
So do you believe that there's such a thing as inborn talent?
No, I don't think so. I think that there's talent is bred by interest and hard work. There's no question about that in my mind. And the more sensitive a person is, the more attentive they are to life, and the more they love the moment that they're in doing what they do, the more that grows. But there may be some basic, physical abilities, but that's just the start. I think that we're all equally, one from one person to the next there's not that great of a difference.
See, I think that's very encouraging for people, because I think, whenever I get approached on the street, I'm out there painting and somebody says, "Oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I had the talent." I always say to them, well, if you can learn to cook, or you can learn to type, or you can learn to do anything, you can learn to do this. It's just a matter of learning it and practice. And yet there's some that, we don't necessarily feel that way about other disciplines, but for some reason we feel that way about art.
Yes. I think it's like anything else too. I mean, it just is your love and interest for it, the time that you're willing to devote to it. But there's also intelligent time. You've got to devote intelligent time to it, not just, I've seen artists who painted the same head study for 30 years and not know anything about painting. And they get better at the head study, but if you turn them around and paint the back of the room, they would fall apart. They wouldn't know what they're looking at. So, for me, if you really understand painting and understand seeing, you can paint anything, and everything becomes a painting possibility.
So that begs the argument about being self-taught. I think a lot of people wear that badge about being self-taught, and yet somebody can get 30 or 50 years of bad experience. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that I think I've seen this in my teaching workshops. I've had 5 minutes with one artist and transformatively changed him or her entirely, and they become better paintings immediately, better painters, and never look back. It's because there was just one little bit of information that's lost. Or I can work with a beginner, and I wouldn't, I would give them the right order of things to work on. I can tell you that I've been playing the guitar for as long as I painted. I love it, but I never took lessons because I didn't have the money back then, or even know there was such thing as lessons to take. So I've arrived at it the long back roads way to where I am playing it in the way that I really enjoy it now. But I can tell you, had I had the lessons, I should be as good at guitar as I am at painting. But I don't have all that. I didn't train properly. I don't know how to practice properly. So I'm enjoying it as much as I can. But no, there's no question that I can talk to a college student, a guitar student who took 2 years of college, and he just runs circles around me. I'm like, what the? That's ridiculous. So yeah, no. I think the right education, meeting the right people, talking. There's no excuse for not doing that now, because it's a great amount of information out there, and you can save yourself 10 and 20 years of just being stuck in the same spot.
If there was one painting, historically, one painting that you could just stare at endlessly and study and learn from, what painting would that be?
Oh, that's an impossible question. I don't think I can answer that one, Eric. That's not fair. That's an impossible question. There's just too many of them. I have equal aesthetic experiences with so many different paintings. Just one that just popped into my mind, and I probably wouldn't be the one, but there's there's a Twachtman at the museum. I think it's in D.C. This big, maybe it was New York. Where was it? It's the big one with the big field of greens and very simple. It's very Japanese feeling. And I love Twachtman. And then he went on to build paint on top of paint. I can just stare at that painting for hours and hours and hours. Just the aesthetic experience of that, so beautiful. And I've stood in front of, Andrew Wyeth paintings that have brought tears to my eyes. And it's interesting because he is one of my favorite artists, because not necessarily my favorite painter, but by far my favorite artist. He goes directly to the experience, and his ability is so wonderful that you never question whether he can do it or not. Of course he can do it, because he takes you right to the experience.
When you say right to the experience, I assume you mean right to the emotional experience.
Yes, exactly what he felt, exactly what he, he had that ability to say exactly what he wanted to say. So he'll turn grass black instead of green just to make another point somewhere else in the painting. And it's just so poetically powerful. Whereas Sargent is such an amazing virtuoso. He could paint like, oh my God, Baryshnikov and the dance floor, and you're amazed by his ability. And the paint is so luscious, and so I love it for that, And and I've been stood in front of de Kooning paintings, abstract paintings that to me just is transcendent in so many different ways. So I can't answer that one with one.
Can it be taught to teach a painter how to put emotion into their paintings?
No, I don't think so, Eric. I think that really, I think that's something. I had a conversation this morning with a friend of mine we talked about honesty in a painting, and I said that basically she said that she loved my work because she saw that in my work, without being being sentimental. It seems honest. And I said, well, honesty is something that I can't talk about in my work because it's either there or it's not there,
Yeah.
But I can't contrive it at all. So
well, I think we have to get to the point as painters where our tools, we don't have to think about our tools. We don't have to think about our colors. We don't have to think about the process, so that we can just react to what we see.
Yes, you're talking about a master at that point. You're talking about somebody who's mastered the craft, and it takes a lifetime just to get to a point where your tools don't frustrate you and the drawing doesn't frustrate you,
Right.
Never mind. But having said that, everywhere along the line, I talk about these 3 different levels in painting, but and if you want me to go into that, I can certainly go into it, but basically everywhere along the line, no matter where you are as in your development of skills as an artist, you can still enjoy it fully. You can still just let it go. There's a point where you learn how to draw a little bit, and then when you step out of your own skin and let it go and just accept what happens. And I think that's some of the honesty. But I think an artist's ability to be sensitive to the world, to be open to what they see, to be compassionate, all of those things come through the painting. And I can tell you, if a painter is more worried about what painting to paint to sell, those qualities will not be in the painting. Right. And it happens every time I try to paint for a show and I start thinking about those things, I just end up dreading the show. I mean, I don't like the paintings. And so if anything, experience has taught me to just be in the moment, be as sensitive as I can, give the painting as much as I can give it, and go from there,
So we're going to get close to wrapping up here. Let me ask you a couple of final questions. First off, what have we not talked about that you'd like to talk about?
I don't know. You've asked me such good questions. I'm just flowing with it. I haven't really thought of. I mean, if I really started going into the philosophy of what works in the painting, like the three different levels and so on, it'll get really drawn out, but it's really important sometimes. I'll talk about that when I do the workshop thing for you in San Diego next year.
That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's essential that I do, actually. But there's just so much fun right now. They're just so exciting to look at the art world and all the young artists that are coming up, what they're learning, and I'm just excited. There's so much skill out there, so much level of camaraderie, and if you are living as just learning to paint right now, you couldn't find a better time in history to be an artist. You can learn very quickly with all the DVDs, like what you're doing, all the teaching DVDs that you've produced, and the workshops that are out there. You just, I've seen just leaps and bounds, young artists who doing things now, and older artists that I didn't see back when I was learning to paint.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So
last week, you should say that. I'll throw this out there. There's a lady, I won't mention her name, who comes to my Adirondack event, the Publishers Invitational, every year. She's been there, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years in a row. And she wasn't a very good painter. And from my perspective, but she was out there working it, and at this event, we're all equals. We don't care if anybody's good or bad. We're out there to play and have fun and paint. And I looked at her work this year and I said, you had a transformative experience. Your work has taken a 500% leap forward. What did you do differently? And she said, I made a conscious decision that I needed to be better. That was the first step. She said, I've been working it, but I hadn't, I didn't make a plan. She said, and then she said, I didn't have the money to attend a bunch of workshops. And so I just bought a couple of videos. She said she bought a couple from me, a couple from other people. She said, I watched them over and over and over again. She said, I bet I watched those videos 10 times. And she said, just by watching them, my responses became different in my painting. Just because she absorbed it, and it's kind of like the ability to go to a workshop over and over again. And I think that's what's so wonderful about the world today with all this online training and these videos, and then there's just all these amazing schools and ateliers, and none of this, or very little of it, existed when you and I got into this.
No, not at all. Yeah, you're lucky if you find something, but yeah, no, it's great. It's like an explosion of consciousness in some ways. I love it. I just think it's wonderful to watch.
So do you have a big dream or a big vision or something that you would like to accomplish that you haven't accomplished yet?
Yes, I feel like I've not really scratched the surface of what I can do with painting yet. And partially because, my entire career was learning how to paint, making a living at it, all of those things. But now it's like this wonderful movie, Babette's Feast. I don't know if you ever watched that. It's fantastic. But it's about the artist having one shot at doing the best work that she can in that case. She was a chef. And money was not the point, and nothing else, but just to do your best. So I don't think I've done my best work yet, and so it's a thrill to think about what that might look like and see where that's going to go. So, but I don't really have any things like career ideas and what I'm going to show, what museum I'm going to be in. All those things are just kind of an imaginary construct that has no real basis on any reality that I can control. So I don't worry about it, so I guess, is that a dream? Is that a hope? Just to do the best work that I can?
Well, I think that's pretty amazing to be able to do that, actually. The big question.
I'm so lucky, I can't tell you. I feel so lucky to be doing what I'm doing, so I better take advantage of it, because I am in a position where I can think like that.
Well, and we're so lucky to have you, and we're so lucky that you're willing to contribute to teaching and helping other people learn it.
Oh, it's absolutely my honor and pleasure. I'll add one more thing that I think is kind of funny, but it's true. And I've discovered this truth, and it's helped me a lot in getting past the fear of painting. So if this helps your audience. I've discovered that in painting, if you make a decision, it's always correct. Think on that a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you look at the sky and you don't know what color to mix it, or that green or that tree, make a decision on it. Try to make the most intelligent decision you can and assume that it's correct and go with it. And then once you start doing that, you begin to make better and better decisions. The more decisions you make, the better, but they will always be correct. And sometimes you're going to say, the heck with it, I'm painting the sky yellow or red, and it's going to be mine. And then the paintings begin to be your own, and no one else will be able to make those decisions.
That happened to me last night. I was painting this painting and I hated it, and I just decided to throw a bunch of red in the sky, and the whole thing came alive. It was pretty amazing. So do you paint a painting in your head when you go out? Do you paint it in your head before you begin, or do you just kind of let it happen?
No, I let it happen. Now, I recognize what it is that moved me, right? So if I step out on location, I paint. The first thing that you need to do is what your response to it is. But that second thing that a lot of times, that's the hard part really, is that composition. Where do you crop it? Where's the edge of the painting? Where do you take everything you see in front of you, and how much of it do you show on your canvas? That's really the first part. And then the second part is what's happening in between that, all of that. What's the dialogue visually that's happening in between that? What's the basic essence of what's going on there? And so I see all of that without having to think about it, So I respond to that immediately. And if you had to ask me what I'm doing, then I have to explain it that way. But I more or less just react. And once I paint the thing that I react to in an aesthetically beautiful way, of course, and then I analyze it. And if I had to, that's like, okay, with the darks over here, the lights over here, there's this much dark, this much light, and so on and so forth. But I don't paint it. I don't paint it in my head ahead of time. I paint it as I look at it, in that sense.
Yeah. So some people say that they do that they figure out what it is that they're really excited about, what they're responding to the subject on, and they paint that particular piece first, and then they do the rest of the painting afterwards so that they can get what they're excited about out and get it on canvas. Do you do that, or do you just kind of work on the whole thing simultaneously?
I assume that when you said that they would do that, it would be working the whole thing simultaneously, and then it's like details. So there are essential details and there are less essential details, So I talk about it like this: if I'm driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour, sometimes 80, and I look out the window and I pass a landscape, I'm like, oh my God, that is spectacular, and then I have to turn my head back to the road, right? What did I see in that few seconds? That's what I want to put down on my canvas as fast as I can.
You couldn't see any detail.
That's right. But you do. You see three big details or two big details.
Right.
And then the value relationship and the color relationship between those two or three big details. Then when you have time, you take those few simple big shapes, you break it down to the next obvious things that you saw, and then the next obvious thing, and the next obvious thing. And that's essentially how I build a painting, is what do I need to do? And sometimes you can just stop at those three big details and you have it. It says everything: the setting, time of day, the feeling, the proportions between things that are working. And then the rest of the detail I can work up in the studio. Now that's where photographs is going to be great, because I can not even look at the scene, stick my little iPhone out there, click it, and it gives me more shapes to break down into later. And detail is nothing more than the breaking down of large shapes into smaller shapes. But that essentially very important initial couple of value and color relationships it's the setting for a story. And all the other detail is just the storytelling,
Right. Good. So, last question. It's always the morbid one, right? It's your final day on Earth. Every painting that you've ever created has disappeared from Earth. There's no videos. There's no nothing. You're gathered around with your friends and your family, and you are allowed to pass along 3 truths to them. They can be truths about life, truths about painting, truths about philosophy, anything. What would those 3 truths be?
Wow. That's the most profound question anyone's ever asked me, Eric. How much time do I have? Let me see. That's great. I tell you, I'll tell you that I'm at a place in my life right now. I've gone through a lot with, marriages one marriage in the past and so on. Learned a lot about myself, and I'm in the most peaceful place I've ever been. Quiet. It seems quiet. And one of the truths that had brought me to that, for me anyway, is that none of this is the point, in the sense that everything I thought was important to have in life, to pursue in life, what I thought was real, what I thought was everything that's gone on before me, whether for me or for anyone else, is not important at all. It's not. That's the illusion, and that the real depth of truth and love is so much deeper than that, so much deeper and so much more passionate, compassionate, so much more gentle, that all of our anxieties and beliefs and hang-ups only get in the way of that, to me. So that's a great, beautiful truth, because it allows me to be empty of all this, of any hang-ups really, and just get up in the morning and be excited about what I'm gonna want to do. The second truth is, be careful in what you think you know. Maybe that's not the right way to say it. It's look into what creates problems, what you want to hang on to, what you are attached to, and who's attached, who's being attached, who's having these anxious thoughts. It's almost like you have to, and I've learned, and I think this is actually an important truth that I don't even think about anymore, but it's like that bad roommate. Learn to recognize your bad roommate, that it's just a noise in your head, is not who you really are. That nagging person who's too noisy, who's just constantly chattering. So I'll drive in my car, and sometimes I'll have a reaction to somebody, cutting me off in traffic. And this roommate said, so and so and so. And now I can literally just look at that and smile at it and realize that's not me. I don't know where that came from, but that's not me. So that sense of stepping back and being objective to that has really been an important thing. But I'm sitting around my family and friends on the last day. Oh dear, you're tough. Can I think about this a little bit more?
Well, you can think about it all you want, but I'm not going to record it.
Okay, fine. That's such a good question. That's a great question. It's a great beer question. We got a little beer party going.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, you'll have plenty of time to think about it. Hey, thank you so much for this. This was very insightful and very helpful. I will remind people that you are going to be doing a pre-convention workshop. It's not a traditional workshop in the sense that they're not working on their paintings, but you're going to lay out for a day and a half all the truths that you've discovered, the tips and techniques and so on. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I'm kind of looking forward to that, because I have a day and a half to actually do a demo, which, as you know, most times when you do these conventions, you have like 2 hours. So this would be fun, and I thought I would be able to give them as much as I know. I mean, everything that makes sense to me, that and having taught this long, I'm able to get down to the heart of really what is important in a painting, doing a painting. And so besides the basic concept of, you need to learn about drawing, understanding values and color and so on, I hope to bring a number of on location sketches and show them how I would do that in the studio. What my process is, how I think about it, how I play on top of that. So the field sketches are just a starting point And when I go to the studio, there's no point in going larger unless you're going to have more fun, have more room for expression. So I'll talk about my visual concepts going from those things to a larger thing. And, any problems that comes up with during the process of doing the larger work. So,
well,
certainly the visual approaches will come into play.
You're already on the edge of beating the record of attendance, and so it won't be long that workshop will be sold out. So cross your fingers. Get in.
Good.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your friendship, and most of all, I appreciate what you're doing for those of us in the art world by sharing what you're learning and what you've learned and helping us all grow.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Eric. It's great to talk to you. Ask some fantastic questions, but I know you're good at this anyway, but that was very enjoyable. Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Quang Ho. Remember, he has a pre-convention workshop at the PleinAir Convention, which has very limited space, and you can learn more about the workshop at PleinAirConvention.com. This is an optional workshop you can sign up for the day before the convention if you're registered for the convention. Convention is almost 9 months away, yet it is 75% sold out already. It's coming up April of next year. You don't want to miss it. The interview was sponsored again by Lilidol Video Productions and the new video series from master artist Zhov Wang, drawing and painting videos. If you want to learn his amazing techniques of painting or drawing, you can see them at lilyartvideo.com. That's Lili video, lilyartvideo.com. It's also brought to you by Fall Color Week, which is my publisher's invitational event coming up this October. All we do is paint all day. You just roll out of bed, we serve you breakfast, we make your sack lunch, you paint all day in Acadia National Park, big cliffs into the ocean, beautiful fall color, and then we serve you dinner. At night, we sit up and we play music and we talk and we have a lot of fun getting to know each other. And then we repeat every single day for a week. And then on the last night, our famous lobster dinner. As a matter of fact, people in the group call themselves the Lobstars. And we fresh catch that lobster every day. It is a week of painting, which is great for those of you who just want to paint with friends and focus on getting better. And what happens, you do 2 paintings a day, and you can't help but get better. No workshops, no stars. We are all equals, and it's a blast. And at this recording, there are still a few seats left of our 100 available. Visit fallcolorweek.com. Even go there just to see pictures if you're curious. The plein air movement is hot, which may be why PleinAir Magazine is now, thank you, the top representational art magazine sold nationwide at Barnes & Noble in America. So drop by, pick one up, or get a bi-monthly subscription for about half the price of what you'd pay on the newsstands at pleinairmagazine.com. Well, this has been fun. Let's do it again next week, like next week when we talk to master artist Carol Swinney. Here's a little cut from next week's interview.
I love the way the light hits the smooth surface that you can get with a knife as opposed to kind of more of a matte look with a brush. I like that. I like the points. I like the edges. I like that you can paint, for instance, a log, and you can actually get it to look like the texture of a log.
All right, we'll see you next week. I'm Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. Remember, it is a big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.